Hey, welcome to the Daily Drive podcast, where together we try to get to know God better. We try to stick some truth and wisdom in our hearts and just try to live a little more like Jesus. And we're looking this week at a guy named John, who commonly known as John the Baptist or John the Baptizer, who was super close with Jesus. He was, in fact, his cousin. They're about 6 months apart in age. Now we don't know, but I'm guessing that growing up, they probably spent a lot of time together like most families did in that day. They could have played together, swam together, vacationed together, worshiped together, worked together, ate together, hung out at family reunions together. But John had a unique calling on his life, and that calling was to prepare the way for Jesus in his ministry. And it wasn't an easy calling. It was one that landed him in prison. But it's why Jesus one day, fondly thinking of his imprisoned cousin, told people, I tell you, among those born of women, there is no one greater than John. So we've been asking, what's it take to be great in Jesus' eyes? And so far, we have seen that those who aspire to that kind of greatness don't try to be somebody other than the unique person God created them to be. They're just content to become God's limited edition. We talked yesterday how truly great people, they go low and they lift high. They live like John when he told his thousands of fans, I'm not the man. In fact, I must decrease and he must increase. See, truly great people, they lay their ego on the altar every day of their life, and they look for ways to go low and lift high. And as I was looking at John's life, I noticed a third thing that really pleases God. It makes him say, now that's a great life. It's that truly great people live in such authentic community with God that they know they can always be totally honest with him. You know, John was a transparent and honest guy. He was comfortable in his own skin. He did whatever God asked him to do. He loved Jesus. He recognized the Lamb of God when he saw him coming. He even heard the voice of God upon Jesus' baptism. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. And yet, sitting in a dark, cold prison cell, he began to wrestle with doubt. He knew that preparing the way of the Lord wouldn't be easy, but he never dreamt he'd be in prison for it. So from prison, John just gets real honest with Jesus. It says this in Luke chapter 7, beginning in verse 19. So John called for two of his disciples, and he sent them to the Lord to ask him, are you the Messiah we've been expecting? Or should we keep looking for someone else? John's two disciples found Jesus and said to him, John the Baptist sent us to ask, are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for somebody else? At that very time, Jesus cured many people of their diseases and illnesses. He cast out evil spirits and restored sight to many who were blind. Then he told John's disciples, go back to John and tell him what you've seen and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. And tell him, God blesses those who do not turn away because of me. You see, when you have an ongoing, authentic relationship with God, you can ask him or tell him anything. You can bring your doubts, your fears, your anxiety, your pain, your frustration, your confusion, and just be honest with him. He invites us all to. He expects us all to. Now, doubt is not the same as distrust. It's saying, God, I totally trust you, but I could use a little reassurance right now. Like, you are the one, right? Because even though I have faith in you, I just don't get it. I know you have a plan, but from my limited vantage point, I just can't see it. I know that you work all things together for good in my life. But honestly, God, I'm scared right now. Now, I will unconditionally trust you, but I just got to tell you, this cancer really, really stings. I totally believe in you as my Father, as my Abba, as my Daddy. I know that your love is unfailing. I just need you to assure me that you're with me right now. If you've never read the Psalms, you ought to do it sometime. David, who writes most of them, gets so real and so raw with God. He just pours out his frustrations and his fears. He gets super vulnerable with his own sin. He opens up about his confusion, his pain, his enemies, his growing impatience with God. He just lays it out in some very lyrical, poetic language. But I've noticed a pattern in the Psalms of David. And I'm guessing that John, growing up in the synagogue, was familiar with the Psalms and with this pattern as well. David would get brutally honest with the truth about himself. And then he lands on the unshakable truth about God. He would say things like that: God, my enemies surround me, yet you're my fortress. My sin is glaring at me. My guilt is eating me alive, yet you forgave the guilt of my sin. How long will you wait, O Lord? Yet your timing is perfect. I mean, on and on, he pours out the truth about himself and how he's feeling and about his circumstances. And then he lands on the truth of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. I'd encourage you to do the same today. Truly great people depend on a great God. So talk to him. Get honest with him. Lean on him. And then land in the truth of who Jesus is. See you back tomorrow.